My father called me every time something went wrong. I was the only one he'd listen to, except he never actually listened. It took me years to understand the difference between being consulted and being heard. Posted to r/true off my chest.
My father is a proud man.
I say this not as a criticism. Pride is not always a flaw, and in my father's case it is entangled with things I genuinely admire. The discipline he used to build a business from nothing in his 40s, the refusal to be defeated by circumstances that would have finished other people, the specific dignity he has maintained through difficulties I watched from close enough to understand their full weight. His pride is earned. It is also, in a very particular way, the reason that nothing I ever said to him across 15 years of being his most trusted advisor ever changed what he actually did. A proud man cannot be seen to take direction, even when he asks for it. That is the thing it took me 15 years to understand. My name is Daniel. I am 36. My father is Edmund, and he is 64, and he has been running his own small construction business for 22 years, and the business has had, across those years, a turbulent relationship with decisions that seemed obvious to everyone looking at them from outside, and that my father consistently made differently than anyone looking from outside would have made them. I am the oldest of three. My brother Marcus is 32 and lives in another city and has, by what I now recognize as wisdom rather than neglect, maintained a healthy distance from my father's professional and financial crises over the years. My sister Yemi is 29 and is the only one of us my father doesn't call with problems because Yemi told him years ago, directly and without drama, that she was not able to be the person he processed his decisions with. He was briefly hurt. He recovered. He has called me instead, for 15 years, reliably, whenever something went wrong. I want to be accurate about what I brought to those calls, because accuracy is how I avoid either false modesty or unearned grievance. I am good with problems. Better than most people I know. I am systematic in a way that produces clarity from complexity, and I listen well enough to identify what is actually wrong rather than what is presenting as wrong. These are real skills. They are the reason my father calls me. And in the early years, I genuinely believed that being called meant being heard, that my father's willingness to spend an hour on the phone working through a problem with me meant he was actually working through the problem and would arrive at a different place because of the working. He was not. He did not. Let me tell you about 3 calls in 3 different years because I think 3 is enough to see the shape. I was 26. My father had a contract dispute with a subcontractor. Money owed. Relationship deteriorated, the situation heading toward something legal. He called me on a Wednesday night, and we spent 90 minutes on the phone. I asked about the contract terms. I asked about the documentation. I identified that the problem was not a legal problem but a communication problem, a misunderstanding about scope that had calcified into positions, and I told him that if he called the subcontractor directly and proposed a specific settlement, he would likely avoid the legal costs and save the relationship. I said, go direct, propose a number this week. He went through a lawyer instead. The legal process took 7 months and cost significantly more than the original dispute. The relationship was not saved. I was 30. My father had a staffing decision, a senior employee who had been with him a long time and whose work had declined, and the question of how to handle it. He called me on a Sunday morning. I listened to the full picture. I said, this person has been loyal for 12 years and has something going on personally. I can hear it in how you're describing the decline. Have you asked him directly what's happening? He said he hadn't wanted to pry. I said the prying would cost him less than either losing someone experienced or keeping someone underperforming without understanding why. He let the employee go the following week without the conversation. The employee had, as I had suspected, been going through something significant. My father told me 6 months later that he had found this out from someone else and felt bad about it. He did not connect this to the Sunday morning call. I was 33. My father had a growth decision, a contract that would require more capacity than he had, and the question of whether to bring in a partner. He called me on a Tuesday evening. I spent 2 hours with him. I told him the partner he was considering had a reputation that did not align with my father's way of doing business. I had done some asking around, and that the contract, while appealing, was at the outer edge of what he could deliver at current capacity, and that overextending with the wrong partner would risk not just the contract, but his existing work. I said, decline, or find a different partner. He took the contract with the original partner. The partnership was difficult from the start. The contract was not renewed. There were 2 years of recovery work afterward. Each of these calls ended the same way. My father thanked me. He said I had helped him see things more clearly. He said he was glad he had someone he could talk to. He sounded better at the end of the call than at the beginning. Then he did the thing he had planned to do before he called. I want to tell you what I felt because I think the feeling is more complicated than simple frustration, and the complication is the honest part. I felt useful. That is the first feeling, and the one that kept me taking the calls for so long. My father called me. He wanted my thinking. He said I helped him. There is a real warmth in that, a real sense of being needed by someone you love, and I do not want to dismiss it because it sustained me through 15 years of not being listened to. I also felt, underneath the usefulness, something more uncomfortable. A growing suspicion, confirmed slowly across the years, that my father was not calling me because he wanted guidance. He was calling me because he wanted a particular kind of company in the decision, the company of someone intelligent and trusted who would hear the full situation and not panic and not judge, who would work through it with him at the level of real engagement rather than the surface level of casual reassurance. He wanted the quality of my attention. He did not want my conclusions. This is not a small distinction. My conclusions were, I believe, usually correct. Not because I am smarter than my father, I am not, and he has done things I would not know how to do. But because I was outside the situation, without the ego investment, without the pride that prevented him from being seen to reverse direction or accept a subordinate position in a negotiation. I could see what he could not because I was better, but because I was outside. And he could not take what I saw, because taking it would have meant being guided, and a proud man does not accept guidance, even from his most trusted son, even when he has asked for it, because asking and receiving are two different things, and the asking can be compatible with the pride in a way that the receiving cannot.
The call was the asking.
What came after was the pride. I stopped taking the late-night calls when I was 34. Not a dramatic decision. Not an announcement. My therapist, Dr. James Osei, had been asking me for several sessions what I was getting from the calls at this point in my life, not what I had gotten from them when I was younger, and the dynamic was newer, but now. What did I leave those calls with? I sat with the question honestly. I left with the feeling of having been useful, which was diminishing because the uselessness of the usefulness had become too clear to ignore. I left with tiredness, the specific tiredness of sustained, careful thinking that produced no output. I left, sometimes, with a low-grade anger that I did not want to feel toward my father and that I had been managing by telling myself the next call would be different. I said to Dr. Osei, I think I've been taking the calls because stopping feels like abandoning him. He said, is continuing taking them a form of support? I said, not really. Not anymore. He said, what would support actually look like? I sat with that for a long time. I called my father in February, not in response to a crisis, proactively in the middle of the day when there was nothing wrong. He was surprised. We did not often talk without a presenting problem.
I said, Dad,
I want to tell you something and I need you to hear it as what it is, which is me telling you something because I love you, not because I'm criticizing you. He said, okay. I said, I've been thinking about the calls we've had over the years. The ones where something goes wrong and you call me and we work through it. He said, you've always been good at that. I said, I know. I also know that most of the time you don't take the direction I offer. And I've been sitting with that for a while, trying to understand it. He was quiet. I said, I don't think you call me for the advice. I think you call me to think out loud with someone you trust who won't panic. And I think what happens after the call is that you do what you were going to do anyway, which is usually what your instincts and your pride are pointing toward. And I think the call makes you feel better, so you do it again. He said, that's not.
I said, Dad. He stopped.
I said, I'm not saying this as an accusation. I'm saying it because I've spent 15 years preparing careful thinking for those calls, and then watching you not use it, and I've been asking myself why I keep doing it. And I think the answer is that I want to believe I'm helping you in a way I'm actually not helping you. And I don't want to keep doing something that isn't helping and calling it helping. Long silence. He said, "You think I don't listen to you?" I said, "I think you hear me. I don't think you listen. Those are different things." He said, "Give me an example." I gave him the three: the subcontractor, the employee, the partner. I gave them plainly, without editorializing, just the sequence. What I said, what happened. The silence after was the longest of the conversation. He said, "I remember those calls." I said, "I know." He said, "I thought about what you said. Each time." I said, "I believe you." He said, "I just..."
He stopped. He started again.
He said, "If I had done what you said, every time, it would have been like admitting I couldn't figure it out myself." There it was. There was the thing I had known in a less defined form for 15 years and was now hearing said plainly, in my father's voice, the first time he had been direct about it. I said, "I know, Dad." He said, "That probably cost me." I said, "Yes, some." He said, "Did it cost you anything?" I said, "Some."
Yeah.
We did not resolve everything in that conversation. I want to be honest about that because resolution is not what the conversation produced. What it produced was the truth, said plainly between two people who had been navigating around it for 15 years. That is its own kind of arrival, even if it is not an ending. I still take some of his calls. Not all of them, not late at night, not the ones that come when the crisis is freshest and the thinking I offer will be most thoroughly ignored. I answer in the morning the way I learned to do, and I listen, and sometimes I offer a thought, and sometimes I just help him think out loud, and let the thinking be the point. He has, twice in the last year, taken my direction directly. Not framed as my direction, framed as his own conclusion, which is fine. The pride requires the credit. The outcome is the same. I have decided that is enough. It is not the 15 years I wanted. It is what there is now, and what there is now is more honest than what there was before, and honesty between a father and a son who love each other and have been talking around the truth for a decade and a half is not nothing. It is actually quite a lot.